Olá a todos, good afternoon everyone. I'm going to speak in Portuguese first, then I'll come to English. Bem-vindos a mais uma mesa redonda da segunda Mostra de Cinema Árabe Feminino. Estamos realizando este evento desde o dia 19 de maio e vai até a próxima semana, dia 27 de junho, totalmente online, gratuita, no site www.cinemaarabefeminino.com. Essa é uma mesa redonda chamada Sul-Sul, curando filmes para por nós mesmos. E é uma mesa que estarei dividindo junto as minhas colegas de curadoria, ALIA, AYMAN e ALMEIDA, e teremos como convidadas Janaína Oliveira e JIRMANUS, SABA, que é diretora de um filme que apresentamos durante a programação. E antes da gente começar, apenas alguns avisos. Primeiro, que se você está assistindo esse link em português e deseja escutar o áudio em inglês, você encontrará no chat do YouTube o link para a outra transmissão, que é no áudio original. Estamos chegando na última semana da mostra, então se você ainda não conferiu a constelação de Órion, que está agora em cartaz, não perca, vai até quarta-feira, e teremos em seguida a homenagem para a diretora Jocelyn Saab. Então, acompanhem as nossas redes sociais, nosso site. Em breve, também, a gente disponibilizará o catálogo da mostra, pois haverá um catálogo com textos exclusivos, traduções de entrevistas e coisas bem legais. E a última coisa, no final dessa conversa, não saiam, pois faremos o sorteio, que é em parceria com a editora Tabla. Nós sortearemos uma unidade do livro Correio Noturno, da Roda Barakat. Então, assim que acabar, não saiam para ver quem que vai ganhar. Espero que aproveitem a conversa, e aí, agora eu vou falar em inglês. Now to English. Thank you very much for joining this event for the Second Arab Women's Film Festival in Brazil. We are hosting this event since May 19th until June 27th. So until next week, you can check the whole program in our website, www.cinemaarabefeminino.com. You can check our program in our social media as well. This is an important roundtable called South to South, curating films for by ourselves. I am dividing this roundtable with my colleagues from curation, Carol Almeida and ALIA AYMAN, and as guests we have Janaína Oliveira and the director JIRMANUS, the director of a film that we presented during our program. And before we begin, I have a few notes. First of all, we are arriving to the last week of the festival, so if you haven't checked the Orion Belt constellation that's still available, please check our website, our social media, and watch the films. They are available until Wednesday, and afterwards we have the tribute to Jocelyn Saab. It's amazing, and I hope everybody can follow the films that we are presenting to the end. Our catalogs will be available very soon. It has exclusive essays, translation of interviews, and a lot of interesting material. We will share it on our social media and our website as well. And in the end of the roundtable, we're having a wrap of a book. It's a partnership with Tabla, a book editor, a book publisher focused on Arabic literature. So if you join this raft, please stay tuned in the end that we're going to do it, to find who won the raft. And one last thing, if you're listening here in English and you want the translation to Portuguese by Raquel, please check the link on YouTube. There is a link to the translation in case you would like to hear it in Portuguese. And that's it. I hope everybody enjoys this conversation. And, well, Carol, focus you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. This will be, I think this is a public conversation that we at the very beginning, we thought about it as a way of sharing with everyone the whole process of curating these films in this festival. And together with our experience of curating this festival specifically, the idea was to invite people that we know have experience traveling around the world through many festivals. And the difference between what happens when, the whole process of thinking about films, curating, programming films, and also making films, how that experience changes when you are in different places, such as Europe, such as the north of Africa, the south of Africa, Latin America, the Arab world as a whole, obviously the United States. What changes when you change the place and and mainly what changes when you have, the work of curating films and having to deal and having to negotiate with people that expect something of this, what we are calling here the films from the global south. So I think this is what we wanted to have at the very beginning of our conversation. And I'd like to start, actually I'm here to listen more than to talk, but I'd like to start with something that we did, the three of us, ANALU, ALIA, and myself, what we did, and which will be published on the catalog that ANALU just mentioned, which was, letters that we exchanged between ourselves, letters in which we talked a little bit about the process of knowing each other, because that was a process of knowing each other during months that we became friends, and how, the differences that we had being in different festivals, how those differences became something that maybe could turn into something greater than we initially thought, because there were so many gaps between ourselves, even the language, because English is not our native language, neither is Alia's native language. So these gaps and the holes of communications between ourselves were part of the process of curating those films and trying to understand each other and understand what we wanted to show you with those films. So I think, so I'm gonna ask Alia something, because she wrote that in her letter that she wrote to me and to ANALU. At the very beginning of her letter, and I'm giving you a spoiler here, and I think this will be a nice, introduction to this conversation, because this has to do with JANAÍNA's work, this has to do with Mary's work. At the beginning of her letter, she writes something that was really films outside the Arab world, and women, Arab women films outside of the Arab world. So the thing I'd like to ask you, Alia, was how it changed for you during the process of us three talking, each week. What made you change your mind, being so, suspicious and a little bit, that feeling of resistance that you mentioned on your letter, to create films that had those identity-based issue in it. So I'd like to ask you that.
Carol, you froze a little bit in the beginning, but I think I understand the question, so I would just answer as I think. But yeah, I still am very much suspicious when someone tells me, hey, come program Arab cinema somewhere. I'm just like, why? What are you guys after? Do you want like news? Watch the news. Because this is something that you know, there are so many places in the world where their cinemas tend to be in demand because people want to understand or like want to get to know the culture, whatever that means. And I, you know, I've always, and I still am a firm believer in the colonial aspect of this encounter. Like, you know, that some cinemas are great cinemas and some other cinemas you watch to learn about other people, right? So in the beginning, when it was like not only Arab but also Arab women, I'm like, okay, the two of them together, that's very that's so not what I do. And I was actually talking to a friend who's a filmmaker the other day, telling me that so many filmmakers from the Arab world gave her, excuse my language, gave her shit because they thought she was a sellout because she was making films about women from the Arab world, right? Because it's just such a sensational topic that you just approach it with a lot of reserve, I think. And I mean, because Junaina had invited me to Rio in 2019 before the world ended for a bit, so I already had like a sense of the similarities, right? Like it felt like we were different, but not, but there was room for surprise. There was room for learning new things. For like when you both of you were watching the films and telling me things about these films that I've seen so many times before that I'd never thought about. They were coming from a place of like a very generative place, right? It's just a meeting of differences as opposed to like a meeting of an already existing relation, north, south, east, west, you know, those like very, there's no power relation here that is established already that we know or that I've encountered. So that's, I think, that's definitely something that changed for me in the process. It's like, okay, you know, it's just not going to be a solid no, but maybe a solid no in the north. But if we're talking about like other places, it'll be different. But again, I'm still like, I'm approaching this from a place with so many questions as opposed to answers. And I think maybe we can pass it to Junaina and Mary to maybe think with us about those things. But what, you know, what do we gain when we approach cinema through lenses of identity, and what gets lost in the process, right? Like, what does geography, gender, race do when we attach them to cinema, right? Like, what works and what doesn't? I think I don't have an answer to that question, but it's definitely something that I think about a lot.
Janaína or Mary would like to share your thoughts on that. Well, I'm suspicious right now because I would like very much to listen to both of you about your experience curating, programming, and obviously traveling, in the case of Mary, with your films around the world. So what are the difference between, you know, when you have your film in the Berlinale Film Festival?
Carol froze.
Yes. We can guess the rest of the question.
Mary, can you just maybe follow up on that about your experience?
Oh, she's back. Carol's back.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm back. I think I'm, you know,
you were talking about Berlinale when you froze.
Yeah, the difference between, you know, traveling with her film to Berlinale and what changes when she's with her film in a very different place than Europe. If there's a difference at all. And obviously, then I would like to ask Janaína a little bit about the idea of opacity, because I think this is something that concerns us all. You know, well, she has a lot to say about this, and that's it.
Yeah, thank you, Carol, and thank you all for being here with each other today. It's so nice to be here together. And to start answering, you know, when Alia was talking, I was thinking about this question of the colonial encounter, and you know, it's multiple layers of like funding and who gets invited where and who speaks and which, you know, which sort of perspectives. And this idea of Arab women's cinema, it's like which Arab women's and which narratives. And of course, you know, my feature film is very much a film about women. It's a film about women, militant, working women. And I think that that's not something that was interesting at all. I mean, I'll say this in a sort of quick answer to your question about Berlinale, which is that after the film, you know, premiered in the Berlinale in 2017, no one else in the North wanted it. And I will tell you, I literally sent it like through programmers, to their emails, through friends, to every single festival in Europe and North America, and no one took it. And, you know, so I started thinking, like, is this a bad film? No one wants it. And at the same time, you know, the film started picking up in the sort of cinema circuits of formerly what could have been called third cinema, right? So it was in Bafisi, it was in Busan, it was in Havana, it was in, oh my God, what is the festival in Buenos Aires? It was in several festivals in Brazil, and of course then it played in the Arab world. And of course, none of those festivals could invite me. So I was so desiring to go and present my film, especially because, you know, this film had actually started off as a reflection on South-South relations. In fact, it was supposed to be a film about, because I had lived as a result, or after doing my sort of my college, my undergraduate, I had gone to Ecuador and lived there for several years and worked for the farmer union, and co-produced a television program. And the film had started as this reflection about the social movements and the role of women in social movements between Latin America and Lebanon specifically. And so I really was so eager to present it. And of course, no one could invite us. But I will say the film did show also a bit in Eastern Europe. And one of the very striking experiences I had when I showed the film in Poland in New Horizons, the woman who was presenting the Q&A had written a book about the solidarity movement, so the revolution in Poland. And she said, you know, it's so striking, at the end of your film, you have Nadine Werde, one of the main characters, comes out and she says, when the revolution happened and we won, they went and they asked the women to make sandwiches. And she said, this stuck in my head because this is the exact same story that I wrote in my book in Poland about the women in solidarity, and they sent them to go make sandwiches afterwards. And I actually heard that same anecdote about sandwiches from someone else, again, not in like a Northern context. So I think that these are these kind of stories that, I don't like the word stories, but these are the kind of counter narratives or like already existing things that are very much about the question of work and who's doing what work, that I think we have to center in both our conversations with one another and in the films that we're making and that we're showing, because I really do think, you know, not only because I'm someone who works on work, who's interested in labor, but also because I think that this question of work, especially of the taking care work and all of the way that became so central in this pandemic, you know, each one of us is in a different place now and travel is complicated and we're worried about our families and all of these things. And it became so important in the last year, or didn't become so important, it became so obvious that it's always been so important. And I think that is the connection that's not the colonial connection, but this question of the work that we're all doing, you know, as women or people who are gendered as women, that thinking through those connections are really the ways for us to try to go somewhere else and to create different different settings in which to produce and to show and to be together and to really change things, because really this moment's quite awful. I'm sure JANAÍNA will have something more positive to say.
Yay! Hi, everyone. Oi, gente. Boa tarde. First, I want just to start by, saying, even though I have this tired face, I'm happy to be here. I was just like, yes, I'm really happy. No, I mean, I'm really happy because I was, as we, I was just looking at us here, and it's the other, thing behind everything that we're saying, is that how the possibility of being together and seeing our works collaborating more than our impulse, what has driven us to talk and live cinema as something that we do in our everyday life, is this possibility of being together. And how happy I am, to see ALIA that I met in Flighty that came to Rio, Mary that I met in Flighty too, and now all together Carol that I met, I don't know where, but cinema related, ANALU, same. I remember when I went to the first African women program here in Rio. So Laila, that is behind the scenes, Raquel, that's always translating to us. And that is something that my partner in other film festivals. So yeah, this is part of the, what changes, I think, is this joy of being together is fundamental joy. The reason to be working with people that is really connected to everything that you're doing. This is it's that's keep us doing things and believing despite all considered. So yes, I'm very happy to be here, and as I think this is an amazing proposal to have this conversation. And so yeah, I think everybody knows how it is to create and do and program films, or to try to show films in and traditional film circuits. Mary just brought up a classic experience in terms of there's a moment that you're completely ignored, and then something happened in the industry, and then you're tagged, and yeah, you're cool, and everybody wants to work with you to program your films. I think in that sense, non-white, non-man, non-North people, it's pretty much the same experience, that you're doing your thing and you're invisible, but there's a moment that you become, that diversity, that very complicated word that industry loves to use in terms of saying that they are making change, is they start tying. So yes, I was, of course, the expert in Black women's cinema for a while. Like, what? I was just like, basically because I'm Black and I'm women and I'm doing programs. That's how I became a kind of an expert. It's no, that yes, it's true. It's not that I was. I mean, I'm not saying anything against that. I'm just saying how you're framed, and then you start working, and then you became that team that was just part of something that you're doing becomes central. This is how the industry works. So, and it's exhausting basically, and draining, and you have to be, Alia was saying suspicious. Yes, it's yes, because you know the reason you are there, but you don't. But if you want to do something different, you have to be there. So the challenge is how to be there, not being tokenized or not being fulfilling the gap. To check, the box of diversity. That's. So for me, when Carol was asking what changes when you're doing this international circuit, is that you have to low down your expectations in terms of what you can do with film programs, and you know, think a lot of strategies of how putting your work, you know, to make the things you want that you think are relevant, you know, really appear and not get tagged all the time. But it's not easy, and it's exhausting, and it's draining. People that look, you know, from the outside think it's very glamorous to be there and fancy, but it's not, sucks the most part of the time. Because you have to fight all the time, you know, you have to fight all the time. And it takes a lot of energy to say basic things. Like, why do you have to put black on that? And have to be capital black, for example. You have, it's also this kind of pedagogical program of being teaching all the time from the very first beginning. It's not that, you know, high education conversation. It's just like, you know, this is the world. This is, you know, colonialism. No, you don't say that. That's not a good way to frame it. So yes, that's pretty much, you know, but at the same time, it's a work that has to be done. So this is, you know, but I'm pretty much more interested in, you know, not fight gatekeepers, you know, because also I understand, I understood not recently, but kind of 2 years ago when I made that program for Rotterdam, the So in the Eye program. It was my first big experience like programming for a major film festival. Is that despite the colonial relationship that can be, you know, at first, it's possible also to you know, build dialogues and create a more, how do you say, the kind of equal ambience of work, you know, but of course there's always someone backing you up. It's a kind of, you know, puzzle that you have to figure out how to work. But once you understand, or you want to get lucky, as I did, to be with very nice people that, you know, are aware of the hierarchies, the differences, and don't want to do that kind of, you know, job, it's really possible to have a kind of horizontal relationship and make things like happen beautifully. But it takes a lot of work, and it's not between programmers, it's an institutional thing. Because even though you have someone, for example, in the program team backing you up in your decisions, in your call, there's a whole structure in the film festival that are not happy with that spotlight, that are not happy with those, any changes in the status quo. So there's inside resistance and sabotage. So but it's possible. But it's draining. But I'm more like interested in the dialogues that we can have here, like in works like that and encounters like that, because that's a place that you can be creative. That's the place that it's not you trying to be the locomotive of a cause and bringing and pushing things over. It's more like, you know, talking to the community and try to how you can really collaborate and bring things that you really think that are important. And that's for me, you know, being a programmer, that's for me the nice experience. So it's the possibility of, you know, challenging myself, you know, not to present, but how can we move? How can we go crazy and do, you know, sometimes it works, sometimes, but this is in things that I'm more, you know, interested in, because then to talk about, you know, the idea of opacity presence in my work, that's the theme that I proposed for Piety this year, that I'm not going to talk about the program because that's a secret, as you all know. Yes, for those who don't know about Piety Seminar, it's a seminar that happens in New York since, I don't know, 66 decades and a half. And there's always a team, and it's based in the idea of non-preconception. So you go and you don't know what's the program. So that's why I can't talk. It's not that I'm being, you know, a bad person. But I can talk in general lines of, you know, the team and how it connects to what I was saying before, this experience to work internally, to exchange. Somehow, even though FIAT is this very wide, traditional New York institution, somehow there's a kind of freedom in terms of what you can do and what you know, there's a manageable place that you can really do your thing. And my thing is that's dialogue. So how the challenge was how to, you know, have this kind of conversation in a different environment, and how to somehow expect, that's my expectation. I don't know if it's gonna happen. If you're attending the seminar, you tell me later, but tell me gently, not, you know, don't be cool, because I work, even if you don't like it, you tell me, but you know, in a nice way. But and the challenge is how to do this conversation in other environments for me, you know, because if I was doing the program in my head, that I had in my head, that's gonna happen here with us, I know but the challenge is how you do that in a total different environment. So this is the challenge, but I had a lot of freedom of doing it. So I don't know how it's gonna be, but I'm trying, you know, anything can happen. But the dialogues that I'm interested in, it's the dialogues between singularities without any impositive narrative. So this is what I think is beautiful about us, you know, because we can all watch the films that we are all interested in, the ideas, and we don't have the tokenized button. So we watch and we can fight, we can love, we can hate, but we can, that's the Glissanian topos, relate without reducing it to the Arabic experience, to the Black Brazilian woman experience, to the African woman experience. So yeah, so that's where opacity, you know, get in, not in the FIAT program, but in my head, in everything that I'm doing. It's just like how you can display singularities, and, you know, in a way that somehow, this is my, somehow people will be, even if they try to tokenize it, you know, they're gonna be a little bit, you know, uncomfortable. They are gonna be uncomfortable. If they try to tokenize it, they're gonna be no. You're not allowed to do it freely, as usually the world, you know, is doing. This is my main goal, maybe. It's not that people are not stereotyping and people will not criticize or whatever. I don't care about that. But even though you have the aim of putting the tag, you're gonna just like think twice before saying it out loud. That's enough for me. If that kind of changes, you know, happens with programs, I'm pretty much okay. It's that idea that Jota Mombasa says about, you know, the redistribution of violence, you know, because we live the violence of the cinematic experience, you know, through programs. So I don't believe that's possible peace, but I believe that everybody can be uncomfortable together. That's it.
I want to respond just really quickly to what JANAÍNA just said, and just say, I think I also have this wish and desire, and part of it is because of the sort of material reality in which I produce, right? Partly because, you know, this feature, again, A Feeling Greater Than Love, that I made, it's very hard to fund. I'm not sure if my future works are so far easier to fund. Anyways, that's a different question. But really this question of always having to do something within these colonial institutions, but because we're forced to, right? In a way, or we feel like we're forced to, because if we want to make anything, that's where the money is, and we somehow can't, or it feels like we can't. Or I just want to raise this as a question, like, do we need do we only, is it only like the alternative is founding different institutions, or are there other ways to work through those existing institutions, but make it less of a struggle, like JANAÍNA was just saying, like make it, because I'm not so interested in transforming them, right? I'm just interested in doing our work, all of our work, my work, everyone's work together. And so, I don't know, is there a counter strategy that we can build together so we don't need those institutions, or so that they exist, but they're we're not so interested in trying to push the conversation there. We're more interested in actually having the conversations we want, because that would be, again, as a producer, as a maker, and I do sometimes curate, but like in a very small way. That's my desire, is to be able to make the things that we want to make, to be able to have these conversations, and because that's what's politically urgent and relevant for us. It's not convincing the, people in wherever, in New York or in Berlin or in Paris, that we exist and that we have complex worldviews and cosmologies. I mean, this is the glissant, I think. I don't care. It's like I think he says somewhere, when decolonization will be most successful when we stop caring about proving something. I'm really not doing him a justice at all. I'll look up the quote now. But anyway, I'd like to pose that question to everyone. How can we get there? Because I think that's where I would love to be.
Wow, I think that's the question. I think that's why we're here, actually, to try to understand what I think, like JANAÍNA just said, this happening right now is a sort of a question, a sort of an answer to that. This is what we have to do. You said that you don't like the word stories. What you do is counter narratives, because it seems that we're always trying to make narratives against something that is, the hegemonic place. So I think the answer goes to, to those type of bonds that we can create between ourselves and between the institutions, because this is like, there's an expression in Portuguese, which is a very complicated and problematic expression because it involves lots of history. I don't think how it could be translated to English. It's jeitinho brasileiro, which means something like trying to resolve things in, making some curves, making some, strategies, some clever strategies, so that we can reach the place that we want to reach. So I think, the work ANALU has been doing with this festival since the very first edition, and now with, this team here, trying to connect us all through this conversation. I think this is this is not the answer, but this is a way to get there. So, oh, we have questions here. I think that's basically it. I'm just talking now. JANAÍNA was saying that, the feelings that when we say, and I think ALIA wrote beautifully about this when she wrote her letter, when she said she was always, feeling suspicious about these film festivals that have those tags, like Arab films, women films, and I think ANALU can, share with me the experience of talking about those films, that film festival that we are making right now with the press here in Brazil, because the expectations of the press here in Brazil about what should be films made by Arab women were very, very specific. They had something in their minds, when the word Arab and the word women were put together. And they asked us questions. I was expecting those questions, but it's always funny to answer to them in a way that to not reinforce their expectations, which means we are here in the global South, being colonized with the very, same strategies of the colonial connection is between us here in Brazil. So we had to fight against that during those interviews and during the podcasts that we participated. So this is something, yeah.
The minds are colonized, people that
Yeah.
those kind of interviews, the media, sorry if anyone from media people, like, I know that's the exceptions. But in general, people just arrive, without the stereotype. And that's it. No further information or reflection. So it's hard.
And that's why I think the idea of the right to opacity, as Glissant, put it, I think this is a way, what you're trying to put together now around the idea of opacity, I think this is another type of answer to that question. I don't know, I'm just,
I mean, I do agree with that quote that Mary just wrote, that you have to stop caring, There's this song for a very traditional, of the most important rap group from Brazil. It's called Racionais MC. And there's a lyrics that they're saying that you have, I don't know how to translate it, faz o certo, faz a sua, just like, do your thing, just stop caring. Do what you're supposed to do, and that's all, And I mean, this is pretty much what I've been doing. Of course, I started by saying how when you're different environments, you have to negotiate, but you're negotiating, but you're doing your thing, It's just like the Bruce Lee thing, be water, my friend, Okay, so they think they are putting on a vessel and you're just flowing. And when quando você já viu, já era. When they look, you're doing it. When they realize what you're really doing, you're just, in another place. But that's it, so how to manage this? So I think it's not about the jeitinho, Brazilian way of things. I think it's just like, if you're not, it's how to live. That Toni Morrison quote that I really love, that she's asking how to live in the margins, and she said, I was just staying there, and she doesn't want to be the center. So I think also the thing about opacity and the thing about our works is that we don't want to be the center. We don't care about the center. I'm saying we, but I'm talking about myself. I want just other relation with the margins, period. I just, I don't want to be a mainstream whatever, I just want the money to get to other people. That's the challenge. How you make, as Mary is saying, how you use, but it's also something that's pretty much real in the capitalism world. If you're not there, that's why another idea that's important for me, presence, not representation, not, presence. You need presence. People that, it really changed, because only presence can create some constraints, can create some, limits, because if you're not there really in presence, it's not a metaphor, it's literal. People will just say, oh, yes, oh, there's this whatever issue that we have to, somehow the phone has, okay. So it's just checking the box. But if you're there to say, no, it's not like that. This person, for example, if discussing, funds, if you're in the board of something, there's, this is a trend, very old and natural and trend in, in films. It's making films. I know it's so old, but it's so making films about indigenous, about Black women, about Native whatever communities in the world, and not being part of that community, and not being part of that community, and being white, and being several times a man. This is so in today. If you look to the main list of film festivals, you can just check the box. How many count? You're gonna see all the teams are kind of ethnical somehow, let's place like that, in their approach or in their subjects, okay. And yes, it's there. So if you're not having someone in the board to say, you know, this is a white person doing the same thing ever. This is gonna say, oh, he's so cool, look at his career, he's done amazing films, all the major labs in the world, oh, he's gonna do something amazing, yes. And then he get the film again. You know, how you change that? So you also have to have the, if you, I mean, I know it's not a place that you have to really have a lot of patience, a lot of, you know, internal peace to be there and to be able to communicate without anger, you know, just to make things work. ALIA is laughing. Because she gets what it takes, you know, just like, but at the same time, I mean, if people like us are not in those spots, who is gonna do this job, you know? It's a job to be done sometimes. Because if the money will not get here or elsewhere in other ways, you know, just like, not, I'm talking about not small budget things. I'm talking about, you know, real possibilities. If you're not there, there's not gonna happen. But it's not easy. So let's stay here doing our things much better. ALIA, you wanna add something on that? How do you manage to do your okay face?
Yeah, okay, a lot of sage tea. No, but I think I'm gonna try to be a little bit like optimistic, which is against my nature most of the times. But I think that our presence in these unnamed spaces, which we are talking about, but you know, we don't necessarily have to name, we know what they are, because it's more of a dynamic than it is a specific institution or a specific place in the world, right? It's really like a form of encounter. And I think that going back to this question that Mary raised about, do we need to work within those settings? And the thing is that there is no outside of these settings, just as there is no outside of colonialism, just as, you know, in Brazil, there are the same stereotypes about, you know, there are the still, you know, I don't know because I don't know enough about anything Brazil related. I just love the place and that's all I know. But the Orientalist vibe is there. It's there everywhere, just as the racist vibe is there in the Arab world and it's there everywhere, right? So I think the way I manage is that I remind myself of these like chance encounters that happen within those really like the colonial institutions or like the hegemonic settings that, or discourses even that we're all part of. When we're there, you know, power would come in with a certain mandate and a certain expectation, but there's always like a way to navigate, even if it's not conscious. Like people meet other people, they click, they form alliances, things happen, people move in, you know, unexpected circuits, just, you know, and for me, that's how I ended up in Brazil in the first place, right? Like, you know, I would not have gotten this would not have happened for me if not through a lot of like these like spaces that we do find that are often tokenizing, problematic in so many ways.
That would not happen if we were not sitting on the grass in the small group during fires, fighting against tokenization. You know, that's how we're mad. We connect. We're in the same small group discussion, and we are both so pissed with something.
But this is the thing I'm trying to say also, just to interrupt.
No.
And sorry, ANALU, I know you're trying to speak also, but I felt I had to respond to ALIA right away. So this is a conversation, ALIA, since we met a few years ago, or even maybe I could say several years ago now, have been having about this. Sorry, just to say two things. The first is I'm not talking about there being an outside. Of course, there's no outside. There's no outside anywhere. There's no outside in the most remote place, and there's no outside of colonialism. But what I mean actually is, and I like very much JANAÍNA's insistence on presence, But what I think is missing from both glissant and both like this general idea of what Alia just presented as like just being there anyways, or chance encounters, is this kind of like feminist notion of taking care of one another. And when we introduce that idea of taking care of one another, because glissant is writing, but he's not actually talking about like how. And I think that the how is really important. And for me, again, you know, I come from a background of organization, and I think that there's quite a big of leftist organization. I think that there's quite obviously a big problem with the history of leftist organization, and we don't have to go into it. Some of it is some of it is discussed in the film, in that feature that you showed, but not all. But and some of those questions are in fact feminist questions, and in fact questions about race. But I guess what I mean is that, like, yes, it's wonderful if there is that person on the board, or there is that person who's programming, or or those chance encounters. But is there a way that, like, through thinking about care and caring for each other, that we can make those things easier, so that not everyone has to go in and fight the same fight from zero every time, and then accidentally meet other people, and then feel okay, and then be able to do something, and then you know, how, and maybe not, it's not that question of organization, of the big organization, but it's some other kind of ways of being, again, like constantly being together, or constantly trying to, I'm always in like a recruiting mode, even though I don't have an organization that I'm recruiting to, actually. But you know, something that we can work through, so it's not so difficult all the time. Because really, at the end of the day, we do need to just be there. We do need to just do our thing. But there's so many obstacles, and it's so exhausting, and they have so much more power and money, and they're gonna keep doing their thing and making their films about the indigenous people in Brazil and in you know, wherever. So in Palestine. And so how else can we do it?
I will cut the discussion. It's very interesting, but we need to take a 5-minute pause. Okay? We'll be right back. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Just 5 minutes, okay? Hello, everybody. Thank you for your patience. We are back. So, Carol.
No, I was just asking Alia, because I think this is something she would like to talk about, and I would like to listen to her. The idea, Janaína was just, talking about being the idea of a white audience being uncomfortable with what they're watching or with what they're, listening to, and I think this is something that I'd like to delve into, the idea of making people uncomfortable, making some people uncomfortable. So, Alia, please share your thoughts.
I'm not sure if this is going to be coherent or not, but and I'm also going to try to not generalize, but from my experience doing work in places where you would want to make people uncomfortable, with the increasing like political correctness and like all that stuff, right? It seems like everybody's become very comfortable with too many things, and and that's why I feel like like it feels like also what do you do with this guilt, right? They always come to you, so many come with so much guilt, right? That they are already uncomfortable without you having to do anything, right? But I think that one of the things that I realized recently, especially with all this, everything that's going on in Palestine, is that this is one issue that everybody is still extremely uncomfortable about, and it's still like, when you talk about Palestine, you are going in a zone where there's like, this is not in the political correctness realm yet. We are still talking like, there's still like, I don't know how to explain it. Maybe Mary can also talk a little bit about that, but there are certain issues that are still so untamed and like so not part of the conventional sort of accepted liberal multicultural something, right? So when you talk about Palestine, when you also talk about defunding the police, when you talk about certain things, there are still those red lines that when you approach, everybody's uncomfortable and everybody does not know what to do, and there's no protocol to follow. And the closer you get to these, the more I personally feel like, okay, we're taking risks, but we're still being sincere in a way, because some turbulence is going on. Because if everything you're saying, if everything you're showing, if the way you're presenting your work is just as trendy as it gets and is like ticking all these boxes, I don't know how much difference we're making. But when you push in these areas that are still like really like, yeah, I mean, I think I will stop here, because I'm sure everybody else has things to say, but it's clear what's really subversive and what's just pretending to be, right? I think we all have a sense for it.
I think also that applies, in the themes that it's about feminism and white feminism, and the idea that we are all on the same page that Mary was mentioning before. This is also because in what happens usually with this, how hegemonic people placed in the world reacts to any uncomfortable situation, usually with violence. They just, even it's the violence of tagging someone or stereotyping someone or putting someone in the box. It's a kind of, Gayatri Spivak said, it's epistemological violence. So it's still violence, but we have other violence that, like the ones we have in Brazil now, with everything that's going on. Don't need to go to details because it's an amazing afternoon. I don't want to spoil it. But also, so I think also when I'm talking about, this uncomfortable place, it's just like how you be uncomfortable and you deal with being uncomfortable, not solving it. Because if you're solving, probably you're making someone else uncomfortable when you cool. you know, that's the point. How to keep, you know, that's when I'm saying that I'm okay with that, because this is the place we know. We know it's how to get in the cinema for 5 days in a film festival in a whole, and it just every day just being drained and go out wanting to cry, because even in the audience, you can't just have look and just have a kind of, you know, partnership, you know, look like what's going on. And so sometimes it's that to being in some film festivals, you know. I had experience of, you know, go outside and cry because the lights were on and I just looked and, you know, just when you look around and you just want to, that eye contact that, you know, I feel you. And, you know, so that's a kind of, you know, of exchange that I would like to happen. I don't know if I'm, you know, just missing up, like, you know, just like putting some, but, you know, it's just like things that crossed my mind. And the white feminist perspective is always something that's really complicated for me also, because they put a very big expectation on you, like, you know, and solving and understanding, and, you know, and they say thank you at the end. Thank you so much. I learned so much.
Somehow no white feminist ever thanked me. Maybe this is, I'm grateful. I should be grateful. They don't even talk to me, I think. I want to say thank you, Alia, for bringing that up. And like, there's something in the middle of, like, of course, Palestine is the thing that people aren't comfortable with, or one of the things, but it's a thing. And I will say that the other part of it, though, is that something happened this last month when, you know, during this uprising, and I'm not sure what we're calling it yet, but you know, we've always been doing the work, the work around Palestine, organizing, but somehow something happened, I think, for me and for many other Palestinians, where we just felt, I can only speak for myself, but I've heard other people say this, like something clicked, like, oh fuck being uncomfortable, oh fuck, you know, it's okay, we have each other somehow. And this is a feeling that I've never, you know, it's always like you've done the work, but you're like scared and you're tiptoeing and you have to only be with your ally, you know, and then something changed, and that's not like, it's not that it's not a concern, but like some barrier was crossed. And I think that this is also somehow what, and it's a stretch, but this is somehow what JANAÍNA is talking about, is like being able to be at that, past that barrier, like, so there's uncomfortable, and I think it's okay. I think it's good too, like, for, you know, there's two parts of being uncomfortable. One part of it is like making other people uncomfortable, or being able to be, you know, confident and with those really decolonial, like feminist decolonial questions, and just being with them and being like, no, this is okay. Like, this just means that I am alive and I deserve to live and can make and can talk, and the things I say are I don't even know what's the word, like, it's not worthwhile, but like, and so there's sort of that, but then there's the other part of like us also being able to be uncomfortable with the things and like transformed through that. And then I'll say one other thing, which I think goes back to cinema, because I know we're talking about politics, but they're the same, cinema and politics, which is also, again, like this question of which films, you know, which films can be made, which films do people even dream that they would make because they can or can't. And, you know, before this feature, I made a film that's essentially about my parents. It's like a fiction film about Palestinian militants. It's not really about my parents because they were not militants, but in that way. But that film, you know, I sent it to many festivals again, and it didn't go anywhere. Showed in like some small sort of, it's more of an art film, but in any case, one response that I got from a kind of major programmer at one of these big festivals in the UK, and he's also not a white guy, said something like, yes, you know, I really like this, but it's not the kind of narrative of Palestine that we want. That, like, it's not the narrative of Palestine. The narrative of Palestine is like, is the narrative of struggle, is the narrative of resistance, resisting. And this was a film like much more melancholy, much more about like what's after the struggle, and how do you kind of keep going, and what do you do? And so I think, you know, I think it's really beautiful for us to think about like what are, in terms of these conversations, like what are the films that push those questions and allow us to ask each other these questions and to be together with them, and then what are the forums in which we try and show them. And I know it's not one answer, it's many answers, but
just to, you know, to put in and just add and something, because I think when I was talking about, you know, the good part of it, you know, when the possibility of doing those things is how, for me, it's just like almost, you know, a game. So how to break people's expectations. It's like, okay, you're expecting to see that, and how I'm not gonna, you know, just like, you know, just like, okay, how I'm gonna program films that you expect it to see like the Black experience on the screen, and then you're gonna see, you know, the Black experience on the screen. So, but not what you're saying, like. And for example, for Rotterdam, I started to just like, you know, to create or to put together ways of, you know, doing programs dealing with this, you know, game moods, like, okay, how to frustrate people. Not frustrate, I'm being now, but how to not correspond that obvious expectation when you talk Black Brazilian cinema, because it was in the title, like, so people are expecting, you know, so how do you use that window, that, because the other things that we are just like, okay, we started talking about how encapsulating how, you know, dangerous is to these fake identities, but at the same time, we have to name things, because not naming is also what places us here. For example, the racial experience in Brazil. People don't talk about it for decades. Like, it was like racism didn't exist. So you need to name things. It's you know, it's not easy. It's a kind of paradox. But so and then just to connect with Mary say about the Palestine narrative. So how people are expecting like the Black narrative about Brazil, and you know, and one of the access is not, it's not a category, it's not that, it's one idea that I have about how, you know, how to break expectations of people around Black people, like everyday life. For example, I created a cluster of films. It's called Ordinary and Black. Ordinary, it's just something like Ordinarily and Black, something like that. And it's just the idea that, you know, how many times you expect Black people to be fighting, to be facing racism, to be denouncing, to be, you know, but people are just there living like everyday life. So I put a lot of films together that's basically, you know, one of them even called Nothing. It's just like, you know, not anything happens in the film. It's just like a teenager having a crisis in her life. It's just like, and at the end, there's not a lesson.
That's a lot. That's a lot happening.
That's a lot. But, you know, yeah, but you know, but that's what I'm saying. Just like ordinary life for, you know, non-hegemonic people in the screen is a kind of revolution, because we're just living, because we do that, you know, just live, you know, wake up, go to sleep, have crisis, you know, fight people, and we're not like, you know, just doing our thing. But that's how, and sometimes people just like, oh, but you know, I was expecting something, like, yeah, so done, check. The disappointment box, like, and then people were just kind of fascinated by the idea that, oh, you know, I'm just like mocking, but you know, it's really great to see how people also is confronted, because it's the kind of uncomfortable situation, not really that people had to leave the cinema or anything like that, but they're just surprised sometimes how, you know, they had a kind of idea about something, and now they, you know, they don't know what to do with the other things they just saw. And this is great, you know, this is no lesson to teach, not anything like that. It's just like relation, just like putting in relation, just like get in touch and see how it feels, how it goes, and we move on. You know, we do another program that we fight, but for now, which is cool. So it's but it's challenging. You can't do it all the time. It's sad also, but how it ends, the narratives about Palestine, the film, the guy, what else came out of that situation? I'm curious.
I could tell a story that Alia told me about this person and where he went on to work on the next. No, she knows what I'm talking about. But what else happened? Nothing happened. I mean, I showed the film a bit and then I said, it's okay, this film doesn't have to show. And I made another one, you know. I don't know what's next. Alia and I are making a film about this question that we're talking about now. Oh, I wasn't supposed to tell anyone. We haven't told anyone.
Oh, breaking news. Wow.
Oops. Well, it wasn't official. Alia, please. تفضلي.
It's not official. It's not official. We're not gonna jinx it, I guess. But it's yeah. Mary, what do I do? What do you want me to? what do you want?
We don't know yet. We're not sure.
Yeah, it starts with a photograph and
the banana.
Yeah, and a banana tree. And
anyone here is listening and has a banana tree, and they can film the banana tree in the rain for us, ideally in 16mm, like for 3 to 5 minutes, please. Contact.
Okay, that was a little bit specific, but yeah, let's do it.
I dreamt about it, so it was in a dream and it has to be real.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know, Janaína, if I didn't answer your question, but
you did. I want just like, I'm looking forward for the film, and please, you know, people watching, if you have a way to, you know, just do this 5 minutes.
And the other answer is that what happened is that Palestine was freed. It becomes free. It will be free, like very soon. That's the other answer.
Ashe. I hope so. And now?
Guys, I'm gonna have to leave now because I have something else to do, very important, really. And but I would just like to add something, because Janaína was talking about, you know, the need to name things, that need to be named. And this, you know, naming white colonial feminism is something really important today, because this is part of the experience of talking not only to the media, but to many of those who came to understand what was this film festival, you know, Arab women filming and, you know, being directors. And most of the expectations
She froze in a very perfect moment.
She's making us expect for her speech.
Come back, Carol.
I was just like, wow.
I'm back.
You were saying?
Am I back?
Yes.
I don't know. Did you listen to anything I was just, you know, saying?
It cut it when you're just kind of announcing the, you know, the question, what you say. It was just like,
okay.
I was just like,
my internet is really amazing today. No, I think the white colonial feminism expectations.
No, you're muted.
Organizing.
Now. You have
yes.
to go. The white colonial.
I'm muted. I'm not muted.
I think that, you know, I think that's a white woman running the internet.
This is opacity. You have to fill in the, you know.
So who is the goddess of internet? She's like, I just come to realize, because every time you're criticizing her, she stops, she cuts you.
It's a white feminist, I guess.
It's a white feminist, yes.
Seriously, we're not letting you go until you ask this question.
Yeah,
Okay, people, I really do have to go. You have no
Okay,
idea.
Ask the question and go.
No, it's not a question. It was a comment. You know, how those people trying to understand what those films were, how those expectations that were, you know, the idea that they have around film made by Arab women were, you know, very close to white colonial feminism expectations. This is, you know, the thing that I noticed in most of the comments that were made, trying to understand what sort of films that we were organizing.
Okay, but I mean, I think I just want to say something to that, is that which is that this is exactly why I'm suspicious of Arab women as a label, right? Because when you say Arab women, you see the images, right? Like you see what you know, is coming from this combination, right? And we tried, I think we did our best as we were putting together this program to avoid delivering the expected, right? And we tried to, you know, find films that were, as Janaina was saying, would be a little bit surprising. But it's still, again, for me, I'm always like obsessed with this question. Who is this Arab woman? What does she do? We're not the same. We don't do the same things. Class is really important also. And so is, you know, so are many other things. And it's like, I will also say that there is auto-Orientalism within the Arab world itself about this concept of the Arab women, right? Like, and about the Arab people, right? It's just like, when these labels just come together, all the nuances are like flat, and then you have these like 2D or even one-dimensional like poster thing where everything is simple and everything can be grouped together. And I think that okay, Mary's daughter needs her to go and Carol needs to go, so maybe we can just like stop here. But yes, I think I would be more curious maybe in the following years to know a little bit more about like how audiences engage with these films in Brazil as opposed to, you know, in Egypt as opposed to Lebanon or Europe or like different places.
So
Nice.
you have to do another, you know, festival. That's, you know.
Yes.
You have to do it one more. Carol.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Carol.
I'm sorry for having to leave earlier.
Okay. We forgive you.
Yeah, I'll try.
Okay. Bye.
Would you like to add something, or?
There's just a thing about this, you know, I totally agree with you about, you know, how complex is, you know, because at the very end, labels are labels, then that mean they are flattening, you know, complexities. I do agree. But also, I do understand that, for example, one thing maybe would be that do the program in Egypt. One thing is do it here in Brazil. Another thing is doing like, you know, in Pakistan. So, I mean, of course, because the labels, they dialogue with the reference people have. For example, Brazil, people have no reference at all about the Arabic word, only the bad stereotyping, classical CNN things, you know, just like, you know, recently, just like terrorism and whatever, and sexist, and, you know, just like, so 1D, as you said, that when you name and you bring other things, it's something how you confront people with, you know, other narratives. And I think it's also, you know, it's tricky, but we have also to think that, you know, when we are not talking about those traditional audience, like from the North, it's interesting to bring, you know, the names, but so also people can go complex without, you know, because where to start, you know, just like, I'm thinking as a programmer, if people have no idea, you want to bring complexity. If you're not using the name, people will not really, you know, how are you gonna bring connection? I don't know, it's just some questions, you know, just just provoke you in the sense that, you know, it's how we talk about it, how, you know, you're gonna ask people to watch those group of films. And here in Brazil, that people have no funny idea of, you know, if you give them the map and say, point, where is the Arabic word? And people will get like, you know. So yeah, I mean, we have to deal with it. And it's a kind of illusion, for example, that, oh, we talk about African films, and then you go to Africa, that whatever place, and then you expect the African audience to watch African films, and it's not, you know, they're just people like in their countries, and sometimes they're just watching Hollywood movies, they're watching Ghanaian films, they're watching Nigerian films, and they have no idea where is Brazil, for example. It's a place that people just like the same stereotype that we have, like, oh, I was in Burkina Faso and people were just like, oh, football, Ronaldinho, every time for years, you know, just like, now it's worse, right? People that might talk about other not good things that are happening here, but at least it's not football. But it was also, you know, very stereotype idea about Brazil too, like, but what to do? I have no idea.
I don't know. I think also one thing to answer from Carol's question and what Alia is saying about the internal Orientalism and the, you know, is that colonialism is not just like it's not monolithic, right? There's so many layers and there's class, like you said, again, Alia, like that's so important. And I think another thing that I really discovered, you know, Carol asked about showing a festival in Berlinale versus showing it in Bafisi or in Havana, and I think that, you know, the other thing is that when I showed, I was really insistent because the film, because of Feeling Greater Than Love is a movement film. It's a film about, you know, the movement in the 70s, but it's a film about the future. I was really insistent to show it in small discussion settings, like in rural settings, and I was really worried that people were going to like watch this film that's like, you know, it's a documentary, but it's also kind of an art film, and they would like leave and be angry at me or something. And actually that's where the most interesting discussions happened, was when I showed it in these kind of small settings. And I think that this is because, you know, if something is contextualized properly and there's someone there or more people there and they're coming to discuss it, that's where the magic can happen. That's where those things can change and transform. And I really think cinema can transform so much in that way, but not alone, like not, it has to be, you know. And also like during the revolution in Lebanon, people were writing me saying, can we show the film in our village? And I would just say yes, and then they would have a great discussion, like, okay, we thought that these mistakes we're having right now are new, but actually they were made 40 years ago. and like, what do we do? And you know, not, that's one example, that's sort of a very specific example, but I think people have sort of this think that ordinary people, just like JANAÍNA was saying about ordinary people, like ordinary Black people just having a crisis in teenage years, that's just life, and they don't expect that that's Black cinema. But I think on the other hand, people think that like these experimental cinemas are only for like cinephiles, but actually that's not true at all. Actually, I think in my experience with showing my work and also in watching other work, there's so much resonance that can happen when you show these different kinds of things in like very distinct settings, and that people can, yeah, that's also like, it's also the venue, like that's a real, the village, like, you know, the village in South Lebanon is an important venue, and so on.
I mean, yeah, I think my last thing to say about this is, you know, I completely understand and like agree with the importance of, you know, films being instrumentalized or directed towards a certain goal, whether that goal is to engage with already existing stereotypes, you know, about women or Black people or Arab people or whatever, or social movements, or you name it. But there's also something that I think a lot of us in different parts of the world and within the Americas and in Europe are denied, is this sort of luxury to make films because you want to make films, and to watch films because you want to watch films, not because you want to understand, you know, the history of I don't know what, or the, you know, what the reality of life in the blah blah blah. You know, this is, I think, you know, is what I personally, if it ever happens to Arab cinema or Black cinema or Indian cinema or indigenous cinema, then I think we will have made it, right? Because so far this is just white cinema, to be very honest, and to be like very clear about it. So yeah, so I think that, you know, leisure is also important, and to watch films and enjoy yourself and have fun, and not have to validate the importance of this work through the political, quote unquote, because it's not always political, significance of the work. You know, that's, I think, something we should aspire to, because it's not something that we have. It's not something that we have the luxury, like we can't afford that. Like a friend was just telling me that her film didn't get into a very important festival that I cannot name because they thought it wasn't political enough, right?
Yeah,
so,
I feel you. But also, for them, I'm talking about the Brazilian experience, you know. We are not supposed to be spectators, you know. Cinema was a very popular thing in the 50s, the 60s, really popular in the same that, you know, anyone is a kind of a traditional family, poor family thing to go to the movies all together. But, you know, it's changed so much, and it's so expensive to go to it's unaffordable for a lot of people. So one challenge, for example, that we face here is how you create ambiences that people will understand that cinema is also for them. So there's so many layers, and I'm not saying that you have to tag political film, but the gesture of making a festival, of making a program, is a political gesture. Even though all the films, you want people to have fun. But even to conquer that space, to be able to sit on that, you know, chair and just have fun, you know, this is sometimes it's so distant from any, you know, from people. I'm not talking about Black people. That's also, you know, the intersectional perspectives. It's a class thing. It's not about also being Black, it's about being poor. You know, if you get a ticket, it's very expensive, and also the world phenomenon that, you know, street cinemas are closing, that only like Cinemark, you know, experience. So you have to go to the mall and stuff. So yeah, so I totally agree that, you know, that's what we're fighting for. But at the same time, you know, just like, because this was, for example, a discussion that happened like years ago in a very selective white film festival here. Like, you know, a filmmaker, a Black filmmaker, she was upset because her film was programmed like Saturday night in the South Zone of the city. That's a heat place. You know, so the audience that she would love her to watch her film is not able to be there because there's no buses to come back home. You know, there's no metro, and she was just like, you know, putting that on the conversation. And there was this other very well known, that I won't name, filmmaker, white women, older, and she was just like, you know, you have to fight for your film. You know, if you're not happy with the, you know. Yeah, it was so bad, you know, in a sense that, you know, and also the programmers of that film festival, they have no sensibility about that kind of, you know, that kind of perspective. What means to program this film? Who's gonna watch it? You know, it's a theater in the South Zone of the town. There's no metro. It's Sunday. How people will get there? So you can't. So this is also about program, and then, oh, but this is not my job to think about. Oh, really? You know, I'm just, those sentences came out of that discussion. This is not the job of the programmers. Oh, if you're not happy about where your film is located, you know, just complain about it, have to fight for your film and whatever, you know, all those layers are present, you know. So it's not easy. It's the relationship, of course, ideally, we want people just to be there and have fun. But, you know, you have to fight for being there, for being there. It's like, someone will have to, someone will have to care, if the buses are there, if people are able to get there, if it's gonna be Sunday night, people won't be able to get there because there's no metro. The metro stop at 10 p.m. and you're like, or 11, whatever. So, that kind of thing. So I come back to presence. If you have a person that is not from South Zone, it's not, privileged, that is just like go walking to the cinema, whatever, doing that job, it will not happen. So how to be happy in watching films. This is our next talk. Thank you all for being here.
I think that's a great place to end also. Yes. And I am going to make a pitch for the organization that I'm all recruiting you to, where we will infiltrate these different festivals and also foundations and place people on the board and be in coordination with one another. We don't have a name yet, but feel free to write to me or to JANAÍNA or to anyone here.
And don't forget the banana tree,
And don't forget the banana tree, please. And it was, and someone was asking on Twitter who's, I quoted terribly, it's Lisson, but I will respond to you on Twitter. I did injustice to his quote. I'll put the full thing. Thank you so much for having us, ANALU and Carol and everyone, and ALIA and JANAÍNA.
Thank you for joining. Thank you for this. It's great. And okay, we should, I think it's a good place to wrap up. As everybody said, good night, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, safe flights, and enjoy the films. ANALU, do you want to wrap up?
Thank you so much. So that sounds like we must have a part 2 after everything that talked. So I look forward to that. And thank you everybody who's watching us. Don't go away. Stay tuned. We'll be right back for the raft, for the book raft. Okay.
Bye. Obrigada.